a recipe on butternut squash soup. So I've got some butternut left over from something else, so we're going to turn it into some soup. Standard soup recipe that I use, although just a little bit different, and I'll explain why. So it's 500 grams of vegetable, 350 grams worth of onion, 3 stock cubes, 125 millilitres of full fat milk, that's whole milk. It's the same price as semi-skim milk, so you might as well buy the whole milk and get all the goodness and the flavour from that. Right, so move that out of the way before it starts leaking. And I've also I've got some liquid from the chickpeas, I cooked some chickpeas the other day, and I've got the cooking liquid left over, so we're going to use that as a bit of stock as well. It's not salty, it's just got a bit more flavour, and I'd rather use something that's got some flavour to it in a soup rather than just putting water in. The stock cubes, we don't need to use less stock cubes because of that amount of flavour that's in there. We're using the stock cubes for the richness and for the saltiness. That's just got more flavour, so we're just adding flavour. It's got a little bit of flavour, but it's got a lot more flavour than water, so we're getting more flavour out of that. And then I've got some, I cooked some leeks and some onions that I needed quite dry, and I squeezed all the excess water out of them once I cooked them. And so we've got some leek juice, cooking juice as well, so we'll make up some of the liquid with that as well, because there isn't just quite enough liquid. So these two things are both non-salty, but they're going to add a little bit of flavour to them. If I didn't have those, I would just use water and stock cubes would be enough. But because I've got those, I'm going to use those. Right, so because pumpkins and butternuts and all kind of squashes, there's a lot of water in them, if I'm honest. So what you need to do is you need to cut down on the amount of water and stock that we're going to use. So I normally use 500 millilitres of water, so I'm going to knock it down to we'll do 300 millilitres, and then we can always add a little bit more, but we don't want the soup to be too watery. So that out of the way. Pumpkins butternut squashes are pretty straightforward. That's the bit from that was kind of there, and I've done something else with the rest of that. So we just need to peel this from the outside. So best way to do that, I can't remember. Yes, okay, we'll use this knife. I'm thinking how I used to do it. I'm going to peel it like that, because my knives are good enough and I'm kind of strong enough to do it like that. So ordinarily I would say to use the skin. If you roasted them whole, keep the skin on because it's got loads of flavour, bit of a nice chewiness to it, and some goodness in it as well. So I'd always recommend that you keep the skin on a butternut squash, but this is soup and we're going to have it pureed, so the skin needs to come off, and I can't think of anything to do with the skin, so it's going to go on the compost. However, we've got seeds inside, and I can think of something to do with the seeds, so we'll be keeping the seeds. So just those excess bits off there, and that there. That pile goes on the compost, and then butternut in half, like that. We'll get those out of the way before they spill over, and then we just need to get rid of the seeds. We'll use the spoon, which I should have had ready, but I didn't. I'm going to save the seeds, I'm going to dry them out. They're particularly cheap at the moment, butternuts. I don't know why. Maybe we're bang on season, or maybe they've got a glut of them that they want to get rid of. I don't know. So, not a lot of seeds. That's strange. There's normally loads of seeds in them. But we'll save those seeds and we'll dry them out, and then we'll use them for something else. Dead easy to dry the seeds out. Just separate them from that kind of fibrous stuff there, and then put them somewhere warm or in the sunlight, and it gets rid of all the moisture, and then they keep for a long time. You can't just put them in a jar in this state because there's a lot of moisture with them, and what will happen is they'll go off. But you can dry it. You need to dry them. That's the only thing. So and half again, so we can get to the inside. Just whip out that little bit with the knife, and then chop like that. Don't need to be too uniform because we're going to give it a good cook. And we're not going to saute them off beforehand. We're not going to saute the onions off beforehand. We're going to simply put all the vegetables and the liquid into a pan. We're going to bring it up to the boil and then cook it till it's tender. And that's pretty straightforward. You don't need to see that because that's pretty straightforward. We'll come back when they're all in the pan and when they're cooked. Just lid on, not a rapid boil, just like a simmer, and then until they're tender, and then we're ready for the next stage. Right, so the butternut is now soft and tender, so that's going to puree down really easily. I tend to cook the vegetables a lot, so they puree down a lot easier. It also changes the flavour as well. So like a thin puree of vegetable soup tastes different. If you haven't cooked the vegetables as much, it's kind of like a different kind of flavour profile. I always prefer it nice and smooth, nice and thin, and it also makes up for the fact that the blend doesn't have to be particularly good if the vegetables are cooked. So I put in 300 millilitres of liquid, and as you can see, there's still kind of quite a lot of liquid in there. We'll have lost a little bit through evaporation, but the pumpkin and the onion are quite watery, so I didn't want to add too much liquid and then the soup be too thin. We can always add a little bit more liquid, very difficult to kind of get rid of it. So we'll puree down. I've got 200 millilitres of the leaky, juicy stock type of thing there. It's warm, so that's dead easy if we just need to add a little bit more. So puree down to start off with, we'll see how we go, and then we'll add some stock cubes. So as you can see, that's pureed down quite a lot already. So I'm reluctant to put any more water in because we're going to put some milk in. And as there's less liquid and there's going to be less soup, we need to think about putting in less stock cubes as well. So I think 2 stock cubes will be plenty. Sorry, I've got an itchy nose. I don't want to scratch my nose and then be touching other things. So 2 stock cubes. Even though we've put that a little bit of the leek stock in and a little bit we've put in the chickpea stock, there's flavour in there, but there isn't salt, and that's the one thing we've got to worry about. We can, you know, a soup with loads of flavour in is a good thing. A soup with too much salt in is a bad thing, obviously. So we'll just puree those up. Stock cubes are a really good way of adding richness to a dish and seasoning as well, so like salt and pepper and those type of things. So it's kind of like a uniformed way of seasoning. So if I tell you that a certain amount of pumpkin and a certain amount of onion and a certain amount of stock cubes is going to be the best way it's going to taste, it's quite uniform, rather than certain amounts of salt, because you get different types of salt. You get like the pouring salt, and you get rock salt, which are different levels of saltiness. So we'll put the milk in. So 125 millilitres of milk should be enough, and then I think that'll be a nice ratio and it'll be a nice consistency for the soup. There we go. So as you can see, we didn't need that extra water or the extra juice from the leeks to put into the soup. So it's a nice consistency as that. That's just about where it wants to be, and I reckon 2 stock cubes has been enough. But we'll give it a taste. That's delicious. So we'll see what kind of yield that we've got from it. Doesn't need any more stock cubes in it. You can't taste the chickpea water, and you can't taste the leek in it either. Some stocks are kind of quite overpowering, so I wouldn't use a beef stock in this. I wouldn't use a pork stock. I wouldn't use a duck stock. A chicken stock is spot on. A vegetable stock as well. So if you want to make it vegetarian, you would just use vegetable stock cubes. If you want to make it vegan, you'd put in a milk substitute, and that would make it completely vegan. Right, so as this is plastic, this is metal. We don't bang plastic on metal because it'll crack. What we do is you just knock it on a hand to get the excess soup off. That goes in the washing up bowl, and then we'll see what kind of yield we've got from 500 grams worth of pumpkin. Well, pumpkin, butternut. Pumpkins are even more watery. Certain ones that you buy for Halloween, they've got loads of water in them. So, but it's not that it's not pumpkin season at the moment. I will, when it is pumpkin season, I'll buy some pumpkins and we'll make some pumpkin soup. It is delicious. It just takes a little bit more work. Lots of people kind of say this: the pumpkins that you buy when in Halloween haven't got much flavour to them, and you shouldn't use them and all that kind of stuff. They're really cheap, and they make a delicious soup. You've just got to know what you're doing with them. So, but that's a video we'll make in the future. So we've made just short of 1.1 litres. Not the cheapest soup. There was about that whole pumpkin that I had was about a pound. They were selling them out, so that was probably about 50p. So we'll probably look at maybe 22p, 25p a portion. So not the cheapest. However, as soups go, butternut squash is one of the nicest soups ever. So maybe a little bit more expensive than the cheaper soups like the pea and the carrot and the lentil, but still a really cheap soup and delicious as well. So there we go, butternut squash soup.